So Valiant Smashers just released, and you might be asking yourself, what are the best decks in the format? Where do we go from here? Well, don't worry, I got you, because in this video, I'm covering the top 5 best meta decks for the November 2023 Competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format post Valiant Smashers. Let's jump into it. What's up, Ocean? You got Matt here, and welcome back to another Competitive Yu-Gi-Oh video. You know, the Yu-Gi-Oh meta is constantly changing, and we're in a very diverse format right now. There are a ton of decks you have to be prepared for if you want to play competitively, or you're going to have a really hard time winning any games. In this video, we're going to cover the top 5 best meta decks for the November 2023 Competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format, and each of these decks has their own levels of success, representation, and power level as well, and hopefully with this video, you'll be able to make some critical deck building decisions. So if you're excited for the video, then make sure to smash the like button. If this video hits 100 likes, I'll bring you a complete guide to any of the decks you want to see on this list. Just let me know which one you want down in the comments. Also, if you like deck profiles, combo guides, meta discussions, and competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos just like this one, you're going to love this channel, so make sure to subscribe and help us reach our end of year goal of 3,000 subscribers. Now with that being said, here are the top 5 best meta decks for the November 2023 Competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format post Valiant Smashers. Let's jump into it. Starting off this list at number 5 is going to be Labrynth. Not only is Labrynth an incredibly low cost deck if you decide to invest only about $100 into it, if you decide to just put a little bit more capital into it, you can create one of the best decks in the format today. This deck here is absolutely incredible because it's topped over multiple different events in the past couple of weeks, especially since the release of Arius the Labrynth Butler, which just adds another dimension to the deck itself. The deck does what most trap decks can do, and that's going to be to play on turn 0, and at the same time, they don't have to worry too much about going first or going second because of that reason. It's all because of the powerful furniture cards in the deck itself. Cards like Labrynth Kuklok, Shandrag Lear, and of course Stovey Torby are all fantastic for this strategy. And of course all the big main deck Labrynth monsters like Lovely and Lady Labrynth give you additional interruptions while also keeping the game plan the deck wants to do moving, which is a very strong thing. On top of that, the deck gets better each and every time a new trap card gets released, because these trap cards, you never know which one will become the next generic staple for trap cards in the strategy. And the reason why is because the deck can search out any trap card it really needs to as part of the engine. Thanks to powerful cards like Ariana, the Furniture, Pot of Extravagance, and Pot of Prosperity, the deck is incredibly consistent, which is one of the biggest issues the deck has had in the past. On top of that, the deck is now able to play a ton of generic cards in the extra deck. Cards like Typhon, Chaos Angel, and of course SP Little Knight find their home in this strategy and are incredible against so many different meta decks today. The biggest problem with this deck though is going to be that number 1, it is a trap deck, so there are a ton of people who have side deck hate against it. Every single side deck in this format has blowout cards against Labrynth. Cards like Harpy's Feather Duster and Lightning Storm are fantastic against the deck. On top of that, because the end board that Labrynth produces is so lackluster compared to the top 4, I had to put it in a tier below the top 4 decks on this list. Now I'll be honest, the other 2 decks I was considering for the number 5 slot are going to appear later on in the video, but these 2 decks, the reason why they're not at number 5 is because Labrynth has just more success right now in the post Age of Overlord format than these 2 decks have had. At number 4, we have Tearlaments, and there are a ton of different variations of tier in the format today. There's tier cash, there's pure tier, there's bestial tier, and there's even going to be danger tier. But the best one in my opinion right now is by far Horus tier. This deck is absolutely incredible when you combine the Horus engine with the Tearlaments engine. They're just fantastic and make each engine even better than the sum of their parts. Not only can the Horus engine draw cards for tier, unbrick hands, and allow it to mill even more cards, if you manage to discard something like an Ishizu card or a powerful card into the graveyard, it can increase the ceiling of the strategy immensely. The end board this deck can produce on either player's turn is absolutely insane. Cards like Tearlaments Rule Kalos or Kaleido Heart, the Grapha Fusion as well, and of course powerful Xyz like Galaxy Eyes Photon Lord, Totally Awesome, or even powerful synchros like Baron de Fleur are all part of this strategy. And the tier spells and traps are absolutely insane as well and can allow you to play through so much more while also getting your engine online. Perla Rhino, Sulliak, Crime, Scream are all fantastic choices in the meta today. The deck is pretty expensive. You're going to need around $500 to get everything going for this specific strategy, and even then, it's going to rely a lot on variance. That's the biggest weakness for this strategy. Well, other than Dimension Shifter, of course, but if you have a situation where you need to mill cards to get your engine going, and you just don't have the right mills, then you're in a really bad position. If your mills are blessed, then my god, the end board that this deck can create is absolutely insane, and this deck can play through pretty much everything. But if the mills are bad, then you can't really do anything on your turn, so it's a double-edged sword right there. This is why we add the Horus engine to Tearlaments. The fact that you get access to the Zombie Vampire is huge to allow you to mill even more cards, which can be huge for your chance of milling a Tearlaments card to turn on your engine. But on top of that, it also can help bait out negation and even stack your chains in a way that's most advantageous for you as the player. If you want an in-depth guide on how to beat Tearlaments, then make sure to check out the video I posted on it right over here in the cards. Our number 3 deck of the format is going to be Unchained, and I have no problem putting this deck at number 2 or number 1 if that's what you want. But for right now, the reason why it's sitting at number 3 is because in my opinion it has a few more weaknesses than the number 2 and 1 decks on my list have. This variant of Unchained has been around for a few months now, and I'll be honest, it's absolutely fantastic. The kind of combo control gameplay it has to it is absolutely incredible, and the fact that it can spit out a ton of interruptions over and over is obviously fantastic. Now, I'll be honest, the deck can play through almost anything, so it's arguable that the deck is actually better going second than it is going first, but you have to be careful about actually hand-trapping the strategy because they almost always will play 3 copies of Triple Tactics Thrust in the deck. The reason why is because they can use it as non-engine or as engine itself to be able to get their play started, so if you think that Ash Blossom is helping you, you might actually be just unbricking them, so keep that in mind. And if you think a non-monster card like Imperm is the answer, just be careful because Sharvara can just invalidate that entirely. My biggest issue with the deck is that there are so many bricks in this strategy, you really don't want to draw any of them in your opening hand. Cards like Shayama, Unchained Soul of Disaster, Abominable Unchained Soul, something like Fiendish Rhino Warrior, even the DDD main deck monster are all cards you never want to see in that opening hand. The end board can vary quite drastically, but don't be surprised if you're facing down a DDD Wave Hiking Caesar with 2 negations as well as an Unchained Soul of Rage to link off with your monsters. On top of that, they'll probably have at least one of the 2 trap cards in either Escape or Chamber, which are 2 amazing options in the format today. Oh, and of course, they'll probably have Sharvara in hand to start popping their own cards, interrupting you, and just creating a whole mess of a situation for you to deal with. The deck is pretty weak to 2 popular cards right now in Abyss Dweller and Bestial Druidism, which are found in most side decks, and of course, there are other potential weaknesses. But the deck is extremely powerful. It has a ton of little interactions and interesting combos that a high skill level player can really take advantage of, and honestly, I would love to play this deck, but it's just a little bit on my budget right now. At number 2 is Purrely, and that kind of gives away what number 1's going to be, but Purrely is a fantastic deck. It has a really unique end board with a lot of really interesting ways to disrupt your opponent. It's basically a Towers Turbo sort of deck. The fact that you want to get Purrely Noir out as quickly as possible is kind of the game plan for the strategy, and honestly, it does a pretty good job at actually doing that. It's a pretty consistent deck as well because pretty much every single Purrely spell or trap can get you access to another copy of a Purrely card, which is really important for what the strategy wants to accomplish. Because so few decks have an in-engine out-2 Purrely Noir, the deck has an insane advantage when it goes first in game 1. The fact that you can just set up the Purrely Noir right away and prevent your opponent from doing anything, you can win a game very easily. There are a few big blowout cards against the strategy. Cards like Xyz Encore and Herald of the Abyss are all fantastic against this deck, but the good news is there are a ton of cards that are still technically outs to the strategy, but that trigger your powerful cards like Straight Purrely Street and My Friend Purrely to be able to just recur your resources back anyways, so you have to be careful about that if you're playing against the deck. While Xyz Encore and Herald of the Abyss are 2 great options if they've already established the Purrely Noir, what do you do if they haven't actually gone to that point yet? Well, Book of Moon and Book of Eclipse are fantastic and generic against the strategy, but in my opinion, what's even better than that is going to be just generic forms of negation. If you can stop them from Xyzing in the first place using their effects of their Purrely cards, you're going to be in a fantastic situation against them, and they won't be able to actually get their engine going as much as they'd like to. The good news for Purrely players is that the engine is pretty compact. You have about 12 to 15 spaces for non-engine pieces in your deck, which is obviously really good. It's one of the reasons why the deck is so strong right now because of all this extra space. You have room for consistency pieces or powerful board breakers like Fenrir. You also have the ability to play a ton of different hand traps, which is one of the reasons why the deck is so strong in the first place. The deck has some awesome forms of interaction. The fact that you can just return cards to the bottom of the deck or even just draw cards on your opponent's turn is absolutely insane and allows the deck to increase its level of consistency and power. My biggest concern for Purrely is going to be the representation. There are just so few players playing Purrely compared to other strategies. Now, I will say that the conversion rate of decks that go from the main event to going to top cut is going to be really high for Purrely compared to other decks, which is really important for this list. And it's for that reason that Purrely is going to be landing in my number 2 spot. Before we move on to our number 1 deck, I want to shout out Dragonlink and Mannadium. These are the wombo combo decks of the format. They put up insane end boards that are absolutely terrifying for any deck to deal with. But why didn't I put them on the list? Well, Labrynth had just more success in high-level events, and for that reason, I felt like it was necessary to put Labrynth on the list instead of Dragonlink and Mannadium. These 2 decks are fantastic, don't get me wrong, you should be looking to play for them if you want to, but right now, they just haven't had the success that Labrynth has in this post-Age of Overlord, post-Dying Smashers format. But anyways, let's move on to our number 1 deck of the format in Sinful Spoils Rescue Ace. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. This deck is absolutely fantastic. It has 2 amazing separate engines that can just allow the deck to go absolutely crazy. Not only can the deck set up a powerful end board with multiple interruptions and negates like Baronne de Fleur and Vortal Savage Dragon with the effect of the Sinful Spoils engine, but can also just resolve the effect of Turbulence and set 4 different back rows to allow you to just play like crazy on your opponent's turn. You can also end on cards like IP Masquerena and Sunlight Wolf, or even a card like Helio to get you an additional draw, all while being able to link off into SP Lone Light down the line and just really rip your opponent's board off piece by piece. This deck is absolutely insane for that reason. It's consistent, it's powerful, it's everything that any deck could possibly want in the format today. And of course, the fact that it can recur its resources very easily thanks to the field spell is obviously an incredibly important part of the strategy. The deck can also play a ton of non-engine, which is so critical because right now hand traps are so strong in the format today, and I'll be honest, if your deck is not playing something like Targeted Negation to deal with this type of deck, you're going to have a really hard time. Now, even that may not be enough against this strategy nowadays, but the old way we used to beat Rescue Ace was be able to just imperm something or Veil or something like the Turbulence, but you can't always do that now because your opponent might have a Barone or a Savage Dragon already up by the time you end up going to that card. This deck is a fantastic option for anyone looking to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, but if you're not ready for it, then this deck will absolutely obliterate you in any competitive sense. And for that reason, Rescue Ace is well deserving of being our #1 deck in the November 2023 post-Valiant Smashers competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format. And that is it, the top 5 best meta decks for the November 2023 post-Valiant Smashers competitive Yu-Gi-Oh format. Now I want you guys to let me know down in the comments what you guys think of the video and of the list itself, and do you think I missed any decks on this list? Let me know down in the comments, I'll make sure to respond to them. Also, if you enjoyed the video, then make sure to smash the like button. If this video hits 100 likes, I'll bring you a complete guide on any of these meta decks you've seen on this video. Speaking of meta decks, if you want a guide to the best meta decks that are also incredibly budget, make sure to check out the video on the top 5 best budget decks in the format right now, right over here. And finally, consider subscribing to the channel for more amazing competitive Yu-Gi-Oh videos just like this one, and to help us reach our end of year goal of 3,000 subscribers. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all next time.